While the world is preoccupied with what's happening outside Iran, there's an even more intense scene unfolding inside the country itself. Right now, there are reports that Iranians themselves are starting to go after members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC. At the same time, Iran's economy is gradually collapsing, as if its strength is slowly fading in front of the whole world. And not only that, even the wealthy elites in Iran are also losing control over their hidden money in other countries. This is because of the new move by the United States Treasury Department called Economic Fury, an operation that Iran seemingly did not expect. But what's even more surprising is what's happening inside the country. Just 2 nights ago, a well-known figure connected to the IRGC was attacked and repeatedly stabbed near Tehran. This isn't a simple crime. It could be a sign that ordinary citizens are now ready to take matters into their own hands. And this isn't just speculation. According to a member of the IRGC on the same night as that incident, there were a series of car explosions happening in different parts of Tehran. At first, the media was confused whether this was a new airstrike from the US or Israel, especially since there is currently a ceasefire. But later on, a video surfaced from an IRGC commander who said that the explosions were actually caused by people who are against the government. They called them hostile actors. In the video, he even tried to calm the situation down. According to him, no one was hurt, no one died, everything is under control, and there's nothing to worry about. But even if they keep denying it, there's a clear message here. A resistance is forming inside Iran, and they're becoming more active. But there's one question. Why hasn't there been a widespread protest yet? The answer is simple. The government cut off the internet. Until now, it's already over 1,100. In modern times, this is now the longest internet shutdown in history. And while there's no internet, the government's control is getting even tighter. Arrests continue. Every day, people are being picked up. Even just simple criticism of the government is enough. Some even have all their property confiscated, just because they said they don't agree with the ongoing war. But even with such tight control, there's an even bigger problem coming: economy. According to the warning from the Central Bank of Iran, it may take up to 12 years before the country can fully recover from the effects of the war and the sanctions. Since the U.S. blockade began, Iran has almost lost its income from oil, which is their most important source of money. And on top of that is the effect of the internet shutdown. How can you do business without the internet? How can you buy online? How can you use a credit card or make transactions? In other words, the economy almost came to a halt, and right now there is no clear sign that this will end soon. Inside Iran, anger is growing. Outside, the pressure continues. And as time goes by, the situation becomes more dangerous. Now let's look at the deeper effects of what's happening. Recently, Brad Cooper released a statement. And if the data is true, this is a very significant development. According to him, the blockade on Iran's ports has been fully implemented. This means that U.S. forces now control the movement of ships throughout the entire region, and they hold maritime superiority in the Middle East. And this is where the situation becomes serious. Almost 90% of Iran's economy depends on maritime trade. Most products, especially oil, enter and leave through there. But in less than 36 hours after the blockade was enforced, almost everything stopped. Nothing was coming in, nothing was going out, like little by little. It felt like the whole country's economy was being strangled. Now, there's a critical problem that's making the situation even worse. Iran can't store too much oil. Their storage has a limit. There are only a few oil depots where they can store the oil they keep extracting from the ground. But because of the blockade, they can't export it. They can't sell it. And every day, their storage is getting full. This means they're getting closer to a tough decision. Should they stop oil production? And if they do that, it's not just a simple pause. There will be long-term damage. When you shut down an oil field that's at full capacity, there's a risk of losing 5 to 10% of its total oil permanently. There's a technical reason for this. When the pumping stops, water enters the reservoir. and the quality of the oil underground is affected. In other words, there's a portion of the oil that will be unusable for a long time. And remember that 5 to 10% of Iran's oil is a huge amount. Hundreds of millions of dollars will be lost. That's why, as much as possible, the government really doesn't want to do this. But if their storage gets full, they have no choice. According to an analyst who is monitoring the situation, Iran only has enough storage for about 13 to 15 days worth of unexported oil.
Probably around 13 to 15 or 16 days worth of storage for oil that they can't export. When they run out of storage, then they're going to have to reduce oil extraction. Reducing oil extraction is not only going to damage their oil export or extraction volume in the long run, but it's also going to lead to an increase in the unemployment rate. It's the heart of Iran's economy, accounting for 70 to 80% of Iran's revenue that is used to run government operations.
And this is where the situation becomes dangerous, because Iran has a history of this kind of thing. Let's go back to the Iranian Revolution in 1979. One of the reasons why the Shah's government fell back then was because oil production stopped. The country lost income, the money dried up, and the situation quickly worsened. Eventually, the Shah was forced to flee the country, and he was never able to return. And that's where the Islamic Republic began. Now, if the income from oil stops again, where will the government get money to pay for its expenses? How will they pay the members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps? What about the members of the militia? How about the workers in the oil fields? And how will they support the entire system they've built over many years? In the end, there's only one answer. When the income stops, everything stops. And that's where the real crisis will begin. At present, a total of 10 Iranian vessels have tried to escape the U.S. blockade, and not a single one of them got through. What's even more surprising is that the United States Central Command itself is providing almost live updates on how they're intercepting each ship. It's like a real-time operation. For example, just yesterday, there was an Iranian vessel that tried to pass close to the coastline to slip through to the Indian Ocean. Most likely, it was headed to China to sell the oil it was carrying, but it didn't get through. It was immediately intercepted by the U.S. and was forced to return to Iran. This means nothing goes in, nothing goes out, total lockdown. And if you think that's the worst of it, Iran's situation got even worse. Along with the military blockade, the United States Treasury Department also launched a new operation called Operation Economic Fury. And its goal is simple but brutal: to squeeze Iran's economy until nothing is left. Under this operation, banks all over the world were given a warning, especially those banks that handle or accept money coming from Iran. According to the Treasury, they are ready to impose what they call secondary sanctions against anyone who helps Iran. This means that even if you are not directly connected to Iran, if you help them, you can also be punished. But this is the most critical part. The temporary permit to sell oil, even if it's stranded at sea, is about to expire. And according to the U.S., this will no longer be renewed. In other words, it will become even harder for Iran to find buyers for their oil. And this is where the situation gets even worse. Yesterday, the U.S. Treasury sent a direct letter to banks in China, Hong Kong, and the United Arab Emirates, as well as to banks in other countries in the Middle East. And why is this important? Because before, these countries, especially the UAE, served as Iran's route for evading sanctions. That's where they move their money. That's where they do their transactions. But now the situation has changed. Because of Iran's actions against some Gulf countries, these countries now have a reason to cooperate with the U.S. And if that happens, Iran's shortcuts to the global financial system will disappear. And it's not just the government that will be affected by this. This will hit the elites and officials even harder. Those who are hiding millions or even hundreds of millions of dollars in other countries as a backup plan in case the government collapses. It looks like their safety net will also disappear. If their money gets completely frozen or blocked, they won't have anywhere to run. And if you combine all the blockades at sea, the economic collapse, the cutting off of financial access, Iran is gradually being squeezed from all directions. And the question now is, how long can they endure this?
I think that's not a correct characterization. Yesterday, we announced Operation Economic Fury, and for over a year, we have had maximum pressure on the Iranians, both on blocking payments into the Iranian state and going after the accounts of the IRGC. One of what may prove to be fatal mistakes that the Iranians made was bombing their GCC neighbors, and who are now willing to be much more transparent in terms of the funds, or do a deeper dive and investigate the funds that are held within their banking systems. So we have pushed out to them the request that we want to freeze more funds of the leadership of the IRGC and any members of Iranian leadership. What we have done is we have told companies, we have told countries that if you are buying Iranian oil, that if Iranian money is sitting in your banks, we are now willing to apply secondary sanctions, which is a very stern measure. And the Iranians should know that this is going to be the financial equivalent of what we saw in the kinetic activities.
Now let's move to the diplomatic side of the situation. Despite the tension and pressure, talks are still ongoing behind the scenes. Some still hope that a summit will happen, a meeting where a peace deal, or even just an extension of the ceasefire, can be discussed. But based on the latest information, it looks like the meeting won't happen this week. It's now expected that it might take place next week instead. Yesterday, an important move took place. The Army Chief of Pakistan, Asim Munir, traveled to Tehran. His mission was to deliver the demands of the U.S. to Iran and find out what the next step would be. And when it comes to the demands of the U.S., they are direct and clear. First, the U.S. wants Iran to fully open the Strait of Hormuz. This is very important because it is one of the most important oil shipping routes in the world. It is part of the ceasefire agreement. The U.S. stopped the bombing campaign, and in exchange, Iran would open the passage. But until now, this has not been fully implemented. Second, the U.S. wants to make sure that in the next negotiations, the delegates sent by Iran have real authority. Those who have the authority to sign and make decisions. Because in the previous meeting, even though the discussion lasted almost 20 hours, the U.S. found out that the people they were talking to didn't have the final say. They didn't have the power to approve the agreement. So what happened was the delegation just went back to Iran. They talked to senior leaders, possibly Ali Khamenei or others who really have control. That's where the final decision was made. Now, the U.S. wants to avoid this kind of situation. They don't want a long negotiation that will just end up with nothing. So the message is clear. If there's a discussion, the person you're talking to should have authority. And right now, it looks like the next meeting is approaching. But the question is, will there really be an agreement? Or will it just be another round of talks with no clear result? While the world waits for an answer, the situation continues to heat up with each passing day.
Afternoon, it's been 46 days since Operation Epic Fury began, and the ceasefire between the United States and Iran is holding as diplomatic efforts play out. The president indicated this week that talks could resume in the coming days between negotiators, possibly in Islamabad. Overnight on Fox News, he spoke about the limited economic impact of the war and said he sees the conflict as close to over. The president's comments come as the Iranians say that messages are still being exchanged between the two sides.
Tabadol.
The exchange of messages continues. From the very day when the delegation of the Islamic Republic of Iran returned to Tehran until today, numerous messages have been exchanged through a Pakistani intermediary. Our positions have been made very clear, both there during negotiations as well as in those exchanges.
The Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson made these remarks while U.S. Central Command continues blocking Iranian ports with over a dozen support vessels. CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper explained the impact of this move, saying, "A blockade of Iranian ports has been fully implemented as U.S. forces maintain maritime superiority in the Middle East. An estimated 90% of Iran's economy is fueled by international trade by sea. In less than 36 hours since the blockade was implemented, U.S. forces have completely halted economic trade going into and out of Iran by sea.